Hi, Stoughtonite. Welcome to another episode of Lioness and You on the Watch. Today we have the pleasure of having Mr. Robert Kirby, otherwise known as Bob Kirby. He's a candidate running for Select Board. Welcome, Bob. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me here, Lisa, to talk about my candidacy.
Thank you for coming.
Sure.
So I think as a new candidate running for the first time in Stoughton, the residents might like to know just a little bit about your background. Can you share some with us?
Sure. I've been a resident of Stoughton for 25 years, along with my wife. We raised a daughter here who attended the Hanson School. She's a mom now, and we have a granddaughter. And they both live here in Stoughton with us, and we intend to be here in Stoughton for quite a long time. So it's in our interest to see that the town is vibrant and beautiful in the years to come. Some of my background, just so you know who I am, primarily a musician. I've been involved in the music industry for many years. I've had a small business in the city of Boston, a production company. I've worked in recording and production and even radio production for many years. And I've been a music educator, teaching music at the high school, junior high, and even elementary levels for more than a decade. And I've most recently, in the last few years, produced the national musical curriculum, along with my wife, one of the authors. And so that's my fundamental background as a musician. But I think the things that are relevant to the select board that I bring, not only as a small business owner, but I've managed commercial real estate in the city of Boston, where I spearheaded a $1 million renovation back in my youth, believe it or not. And I also learned very much about the construction trades through my brother. Growing up, I was an apprentice under him and learned carpentry and different trades, which I was able to utilize in my own life as a sideline, just doing remodeling kitchens and bathrooms and different things that people would hire me for, just because I learned those skills. So I learned things about project management, real estate management, and development through those trades as a sideline. And so I've always been interested in that aspect of life. And I think that those experiences will be valuable in my service to the select board.
So could you just tell us a little bit of why you're looking to run for select board?
Well, the reason I got involved was I've been a town meeting rep for the last few years, and I've talked to a lot of people when I was out and about in my neighborhood, throughout the town, just to talk about the issues that the town has on its plate and getting a pulse for where people stand on different issues. And what I kept finding over and over is people were kind of unsatisfied with the leadership in the town. They were concerned about the direction we were going, particularly with capital projects and so forth. And more, this tension was growing, especially over the last year where we had a lot of contentiousness regarding the South School project. And so people started suggesting to me, why don't you consider running for select board? So, I had to kind of take it under advisement, talk about it with my wife. It's a big commitment. These positions that the town has are voluntary. I mean, we don't often see the sacrifice these people make when they step up and take these positions. It's a lot. So we don't take it lightly. And so we hashed it through, prayed about it, and said, you know what, I think this would be a way to impact the town in a more substantial way than just being a town meeting rep. So that's why.
Okay, what do you see as the most pressing issues facing Stoughton?
Well, I think that there are several. And foremost in the lineup, I think, is our budgeting, our capital management, and fiscal responsibility. I mean, that has been at the forefront of every discussion in every different department throughout my experience as a town meeting rep and just conversations with people. So that's number one. After that, I would say other categories that are important but not as foremost would include public safety, non-urbanization, and I hope we get to talk more about that because
we will. I have a question here for that.
There's a lot. But another big thing, because I think communication has broken down a little bit in the last year. There's been a lot of, like I said, contentiousness, and I think transparency is a big concern for people right now.
Can I ask you, because that's a great word, and I hear it a lot. What does transparency, as a taxpayer, what do you expect a taxpayer means when they hear the word transparency?
That they understand the decision-making processes, how they're made, who's making these decisions, what their place in the decision-making process is, so that all the stakeholders of the town are included in this. So there is, America itself is a republic, but it's a democratic republic. I mean, we choose people to represent us, and we authorize them to act on our behalf. So they're representatives. But the democratic process, hopefully instills our values in those persons who are charged with that responsibility. So there needs to be a forum in which the public can speak and make known their interest, so those representatives are not simply taking on their own agenda. And that's critical. So I think some of that has been missing in the processes that have been very contentious in the town. For example, the South School project, which I know we're going to talk more about.
Mm-hmm. In terms of transparency, have you noticed at the last special town meeting we had, February 3rd, I've gotten a lot of feedback on a maneuver to lay questions on the table that taxpayers actually signed to get a petitioned article being able to be presented at town meeting, and there was a way to shut that down at town meeting so that things that people are advocating for financial best practices was not even able to be discussed. How would, as a taxpayer, I'm not quite sure why a leader would be part of shutting that down. And I think the taxpayers want to know where somebody like yourself, as a candidate for select board, would actually stand. Would you ever take that type of...
Yes, I think this is the thing. So when we're looking at advocacy for transparency, I think we need to build a coalition at the select board level. At town meeting, it's almost too late to make a difference. The leadership needs to embrace the concept ahead of time, and that's going to require some public input and some public forum to facilitate that discussion so it can really be something that motivates the select board. They aren't going to act in a vacuum. They need to see where the pulse is of the people. So, getting some ground support, kind of grassroots campaign to motivate, get a public forum, get something enacted at the select board level. And that's why it's critical that we have people that are advocates for this kind of transparency at that level. And then it will come to town meeting, and it's much more likely to be enacted if we can start earlier in the process.
Mm-hmm. So how would you advocate to achieve comprehensive fiscal disclosure, inclusive of all the parts of fiscal, such as revenue, capital projects, debt management, and savings, given that this has been an ongoing issue for Stoughton in terms of just being able to discuss those issues, not only as you saw as a town meeting rep at the special town town meeting this year, but even like on the recent working group that TVs weren't allowed in and they were held at 5:30. Well, the majority of taxpayers are at work at 5:30 or just coming home. So I would just like some of your thoughts with regard to those issues.
Well, it's interesting. Recently, here on SMAC, on the Around Town show, I saw our town manager talking about transparency, some of these issues, and I was encouraged by the fact when it came to the discussion on trash, for example. Mm-hmm. I know there's a an issue coming up in the state in terms of our ultimate, end for all our trash products, where they're going to end up, and out of state seems to be the eventual target. We have a few years to kind of grapple with this, but the town manager made the point that we're not making any decisions. We're going to have, public forums and inclusion in this process. We're not going to do anything until we get the feedback from the public. And I think that's very encouraging. I think that same principle needs to be applied in all the other areas of management, whether it's, the budget processing, capital expenditures. So we need to host town hall meetings. They need to be on SMAC and other avenues, social media, places where people can make their voice known. And some of the decision making that is critical to the ultimate design of projects or whatnot, or the shape they're going to take, needs to get that critical feedback early in the process, because what ends up happening is we get married to an idea when it's too late to make those revisions without, some destructive change. And so that's the thing. We need it early on. We need it to be accessible, and it has to be comprehensive.
So to that point, as a select board member, I noticed this year is the least amount of public discussion on the upcoming fiscal 26 budget. And I've been hearing, not only by watching the select board, but as a member of the finance committee, so little discussion, public discussion about the budget. And the town manager was advocating for having private discussions about the budget. And I'm trying to advocate for having public discussions in all the areas with revenue and capital projects. And really it all comes down to priorities and how the budget is formed and the decisions made against a set of policies. Obviously mentioned GFOA, which is Government Finance Officers Association. Again, I just need your thoughts in, as a taxpayer, let alone a finance committee member, how that's okay to not allow these discussions.
Well, I think that needs to be reformed. I think we need to include these discussions. We have technology that's able to facilitate more access to the public. I know people are challenged to sit down and watch MAC or to come to the town hall for a forum. A very small percentage of the population is going to be that politically engaged, if you will. But through social media and through other avenues, even taking a survey, these days is so much easier than in the past. We have the electronic means to get the pulse of where people stand on different things. I know it's striking a balance between the representative and the Democratic side. We charge these public officials with the responsibility to make these decisions, but they cannot operate in a vacuum. So we have to facilitate both. And so as a select board member, I would advocate to the chair of the select board that we, pool our ideas and find ways that we can enhance this community involvement, because it's going to be critical. We have too many big decisions coming on our horizon to leave the town out of the discussion. It's critical.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we will not have the kind of harmony that we need together. Because right now, we see people polarized, and the South School project is emblematic of that.
That's my next question, actually, about the South School project. Where do you stand on it, and what do you see as a solution to the dissension that you're basically referring to now?
Well, this is the thing. With the South School, it's been an issue that's been kicked around for a long time. Nothing's ever come of it. Finally, we got a committee together a couple of years ago to look at it, and they came forward with the plan. Unfortunately, when they came forward with the plan, it was very expensive. Granted, it had a sizable chunk of the cost being offset by MSBA funding, which was great. But when you looked at the nuts and bolts of it, you discovered that this project was 1.5 times ultimately the cost of the high school. Now, there was a lot of contentious debate around whether we should build the high school, but ultimately the town consented to it, and we got it done. And that made sense because the high school serves the entire student body of the town. So you have to have a good high school. I mean, we could talk about the flaws and the things that weren't planned right or according to our needs, but that's another discussion. But when you're talking about an elementary school, this is at best going to serve about 25% of the population of the town. So when you look at the fact that the high school costs $4 million plus over 20 years, and this project's going to cost $4 million plus over 30 years, there's a scale there that's out of proportion. So the economy of scale dictates that there's something off about this. If one project serves the entire community and the other one's only serving 25% of it at 1.5 times the cost, this is out of proportion. You know, in 2017, there was a school plan that was put together. Actually, I have a little table that came from their own document. And they looked at the cost of repairing or doing extensive renovations and maybe additions and so forth, or additions and an entirely new building for the South School, the O'Donnell Middle School, the Wilkins, the Jones, the Hanson, the Dahl, Gibbons. They had it all kind of mapped out, and they revised the numbers in 2023, just at the outset of the South project. And so we have
at the
these
design phase.
At the design phase. So we had numbers, and the projected cost to replace the South School at that time was $43 million. So, you know, we'd like to ask the question: how did we get from an initial projection of $43 million to $114 million? Mm-hmm. That's quite a different number. Now they might say, well, we combined two schools into one, but still, that's more than twice the cost. And when you look at other projects that the MSBA has funded, the average cost per square foot is about $300 to $400 a square foot, whereas this one is over $900. So this is, like, as far as I can see, the most expensive project the MSBA is funding in the last number of years. So how does that add up, and how does that turn into frugality for the city of Stoughton that's looking to...
For the town of Stoughton.
For the town of Stoughton, that is looking to undertake a bunch more enormous capital projects in the next few years.
And so that lends me to, what about the way to pay for this as well? Debt inside versus debt exclusion.
Yes, that's an important point, because they're predicating this on a debt override instead of something that could be funded in the budget. Now, when you and I go out to buy a home, we do our inventory on our income and our expenses. We go to a bank. They look at the percentage of what we can afford, and they pre-approve us for a loan, and we go out and we shop for a house that fits our budget, what we know we can afford. Well, how does a town do that? If they have these standards, the GFOA guidelines and best practices, they already have a percentage of their budget allocated for capital expenditures, and they can say, this is what we can afford. In the absence of that, they have to go to the taxpayers and ask them what we can afford. And how do they know when they've hit the wall? It's when the taxpayers say no.
Exactly.
So last year, when this issue came to the town for a vote, the taxpayers said no. It was like a tea party, throwing the tea in the water and saying, no, we're not going down this road. But rather than recognizing the moment for what it was, the authorities in charge of this said, wait a second, we can't give up on this. We'll lose our MSBA funding. So rather than taking restock and how to better serve the goal and do something more economical, they just doubled down and tried to get this through a second time, so it's coming up for a vote again. But the basic parameters haven't changed. So I think the voters are likely to vote the same way, is my take on it. Granted, they're doing a much more proficient job at getting their message out. They're doing an admirable job of stating their position. But the bottom line is, when you still consider the economy of scale, something is off, and we should be looking at a plan B that doesn't include modulars and all the, in my opinion, have created kind of a false dichotomy. It's either this or
exactly
all these terrible alternatives. I think there's a plan C, if you will, which is let's redesign this project to make it more affordable. We still need a new South School. I think that's a given. But we need to do it with consideration of all these other things. They say this will be, it for elementary schools for 50 years. But the truth is, these other things, these repairs and renovations for the Wilkins, Jones, Hanson, Daw, and these are still on the table. And if this cost went from $43 million to $114 million, what are these costs that are built into the table going to turn into?
Well, that's why people want to hear the full picture, the capital plan.
Exactly. Because we've already heard the superintendent talk about the O'Donnell Middle School going here in this report. It was $130 million.
And now they're talking over $300
they're talking
million.
over $300 million.
Yes. Just as we're running short in time, I wanted to also talk to you about Stoughton being a town and what you might be noticing with regard to urbanization or so for those who, for the city-like structures coming in and the density coming into Stoughton.
Here's another project that's emblematic of the difficulty. Hebrew Life came to the town last year with a proposal to put in affordable elderly housing, which is something we've needed for a long time. So everybody was on board. I went to the meetings, as did you, and a number of a coalition that had an open mind, but at the same time were very concerned about the nature of the structure. So when we got to see the actual parameters, it was like my heart sank in my chest. It was a 6-story structure. It looked like it belonged in Dorchester or Brookline or somewhere in the inner city, but not smack dab in the middle of a rural part of Stoughton. It just didn't make sense. Aesthetically, it was off.
And what about the fact that it was going to be a subsidized project instead of a market rate project?
Yes, this is the other thing. We would like to know who set that up, because we clearly had a choice. Now, I know the Office for Housing Administration in Stoughton was looking for, affordable elderly housing, but there's a plethora of possibilities of that. You can build single, standalone homes in a community structure for 55 plus communities, like they have in communities all around us that are aesthetically pleasing. They're consonant with the type of rural environment and the surrounding neighborhoods. Because when we put together the Stoughton Master Plan in 2015, they talked about this aesthetic and the environment for the neighborhoods and keeping that character in place. So the imposition of this was totally against that. And there was nobody in the leadership that was pushing back on it. So again, if I was in the select board, I would be advocating, no, this structure doesn't belong in this environment. So we did push back. We got them to withdraw their proposal and revise it down to 100 units, so it was only a couple of stories. It was half the size of what it was formerly. Of course, it did pass through all the channels it needed to get approved, which was what we expected because of its being billed as affordable housing. But nonetheless, we need someone in there who's going to keep in mind the overall environment of the town, and that we want to keep it as a town that's rural, nice suburban, and not just follow every other community that's being pressured by the urban sprawl that comes from the gentrification of the city of Boston, which is pricing ordinary middle class and lower income families out. They keep pushing out into the suburbs, and so Stoughton will become a dumping ground for subsidized housing and people if we don't keep a watch on it. Other communities like Milton and so forth, they have pushed back when the city-state has tried to impose on them more housing.
So what I hear you saying is you're looking more for a balance.
Absolutely.
In the approach.
We need market rate housing in addition to low-income housing, but we need to place it in the appropriate zones within the city, and we have to keep the whole constituency in mind and the overall viability of the town financially.
Well, I want to thank you for coming here today, and I wish you luck on your candidacy for Select Board. So again, this is Lioness and You on the Watch, and I'd like to thank Mr. Kirby, Robert Kirby, for coming here today and introducing himself to us. Thank you very
for
much,
having me,
Bob.
Lisa.
Take care.